Tinkerers Ottawa. We're based in Canada. Our group is just a bunch of nerds, kind of like ourselves, tinkering with large language models, building startups, working at different companies, even at the government. Surprise, surprise. So a couple cool things about you, and this is really cool because it's the first time I'm actually like doing research about the person I'm talking to before the webinar. So this is new to me. But you actually was working at Cruise, and you left the company right before that one incident on October 2nd. It kind of like shook the entire industry and company, which you can touch on if you want. And the second interesting thing about you is that your career is actually like 80%, 90% was like product design and design. You went to school for design, and your entire career has been like pretty substantial. Like you worked at well-known names like Square, right? And then Cruise, General Motors. But now you're building this platform for large language model observability called Baserun.ai. So first questions first. As somebody who also majored in the arts myself, so I actually went to school to do film studies. I'm curious, like, what made you choose to pivot into like tech, but also like to AI?
I think I was always in tech. I was earlier when I was younger. I want to be a designer just because I feel designer has this like a power. Less depends on the language barrier. I feel like designer can travel more. I can visit a lot of places. I was grew up in China, but I didn't quite figure out what I want to design. So earlier in my life, I did a landscape design, then pivot to industry design, and happened that's a time like an iPad was launched in 2010, and that was an exciting moment. Like there's a thing called interaction design. So I did my master in interaction design. But more I get into it, most of the time you are applying interaction design in like HCI context, like design like human computer interactions. So that's kind of how I, like when I first got my full-time job, I'm already in tech. But more I being a designer in tech, I really have this niche to build myself instead of like, tell the engineer to do X, Y, Z, that interaction. After many, many years, feel like, why can't I do it myself? So that's kind of how I get into tech. But in general, I'm just really excited about more cutting edge technology, and all my career, I'm trying to getting closer to what's the latest and to get my hands on it. So that's why I'm in the AI space right now. I thought it's very similar to autonomous vehicle when I first, when we think about AV, roughly at Cruise, we have team doing perception, and then the output of perception model put into prediction, and then the prediction models output get into planning control. It's a lot similar with when we think about autonomous agent. You have like a perceive stage, and you have planning stage and act stage. And I actually believe a lot of people today are building AI agent have similar, like a logic as like there's a bot AI take multiple phase. But how do we effectively to develop this type of use case? One challenge right now everyone's thinking is bring AI to production. There actually, I think there's many challenges around, like a lot of people don't even know what is a good use case. There's a lot of challenge around like a data security, but ignore all those like external challenges. As soon as people get into building phase, there are two main issues. One is the quality, one is the cost. So quality, we all were aware, like the model can be biased, can hallucinate sometime, and most time it's very unpredictable. Like it works sometimes, it doesn't work other time, and also coupled with like a latency, model drifting, so makes the quality really hard to control. Compare with the traditional software. The other part is the cost. I heard people mentioning about fund tuning, like inference cost. It is a big issue. We kind of, as soon as people try to productionizing their application, as soon as their model get to their application get to certain scale, the inference cost by using like GPT can be high. So that's why a lot of people are talking about open source model. Most of the case, what I heard is not really about the performance. Most time it's around the cost, as like we can get 80-90% of quality out of the open source model, but reduce the cost drastically. So that's kind of this two challenge in current most team are facing when they try to productionizing AI application. But if we looking into these two problems, their workflow to solve them are very, very similar. So largely, if we break down, development lifecycle into 4 phases: building, test, release, and monitor. I put the monitor at the beginning, roughly because when we're trying to improve quality, often what we need to start is curate the testing scenarios. Oftentimes when we launch a chatbot, we don't really foresee all the possible scenario your end user might use your application for. So monitoring is essential as a tool to collecting, okay, here's all the scenario we don't have. Let's add it to our, like a testing data set. So for the next iteration, we make sure we can measure this particular use case. During the build phase, there's also this kind of collaboration around like a product domain experts to define the business objective. Essentially, they're also doing like a curating testing scenario as well. Like you define what's the goal of this application, then the developer will try to build a pipeline, build iterating prompt to achieve that. And then all the application need through this like testing phase. And testing phase, developer conduct the test. Often cases you need to share the testing results with the domain expert with the product. This is more referring like your team is at a certain scale. Like normally developer are really looking at efficiency, like token size, cost, does it do the same? But the other part is around the output quality sometimes can be very subjective. Like in the case that you're building an educational app or you're building a healthcare app, you need to bring those like domain expert come in to grade all the output, to make sure the output align with the brand image, to make sure the output really, like accurate and not hallucinate. So this is another phase in testing. And then there's a release phase. And release phase, this is one part is observability is important because oftentimes product person has this like a business objective in mind. Like I want to make sure the customer satisfaction score is reaching certain level. I want to make sure our bot does all the users' questions. But it's hard to really measure it really measure it like all automated today. As we know, the output is just like strings, and a lot of strings is hard to directly say yes and no. So this is also a very collaborative experience, like a developer and PM collaborating, make sure all the code changes align with the business objective. Similar with reducing costs is actually follow very simple, like a similar logic, but instead of like collecting edge case, often at the monitor phase, the developer are working with a domain expert, more curating the golden training data sets, and use that training data sets for fine tuning open source model, and then swap out like GPT to reduce the cost. So in this whole workflow, like continuous iterations were important because oftentimes one iteration you only capture a certain data set. As you scale, as you launch to more user, there's new testing case coming, there's new like data set coming. So you need to continually iterate in the application. And often case when you first launch, you don't really have enough user or enough data, or like if you use GPT at the beginning, you need to collect a certain amount of data to fund an open source model. The other challenge is around prevent bad behavior. Even you launch an application right away, and you might have like a user trying to jailbreak, there's a certain unpredictable interaction that happen. So the monitoring is important. The other case is the model change over time. So even you use GPT-4, it works right now. And over time, maybe there's latency challenges, or maybe there's quality, like model drifting. Same particular workflow maybe produce different output. So that means like a continuous monitoring iteration is important. And the human in the loop is also very essential. And go back to the earlier talking about the domain experts. It really depends on the scenario, what are you building for. But if everything is very reliable, like is very predictable, you already write a function, to replace the model part. The part we use generative AI is we are trying to replace a part more like a creative, more customizable. So that's a part as we often need to bring the domain experts into a loop to grading, evaluating the output in the various stage.
from your experience, Effy, like, do you see the role of a product manager being drastically different or the same when building an LLM application and in the iteration process with developers?
I think the role are shifting. So I think even ask the room today, maybe your background was in ML ops. But today, when we think of people building LLM, there's a concept called AI engineer. I think general developer are moving to just every software developer are able to develop AI. The bar, not to really think the bar, it's more like this is an opportunity. Compared with traditional ML, you need like a really large ML engineer team, including data scientists, people building pipelines, and like researcher type all work together for developing model. The need for building an ML team is very small right now. We just product engineer team. But as a product engineer team in WoW, I can say the PM and the other, I call it like subject matter experts. They can be a PM, but in other cases can be a QA, can be like a writer. So it depends on what you're building. I do think they will be more involved just because we all know how to write prompts. There's really no reason to stop the expert to be more involved in the testing and the iteration cycle. But they just don't have the tool today. It's feel like they work very siloed. And the interaction I saw is developer write a prompt, in maybe they use notebook or maybe they write their own pipeline, then export all the output into a Google Sheet and then pass on to the domain expert to grade our result and annotate results and giving that feedback back to the engineer for the next iteration. That's kind of what people do today. I don't feel longer term that what will happen. And even thinking further in the 5 years, 10 years, who is building software? I don't feel it, so we're talking about folks in this room thinking about use AI to write code. Today, there's a barrier developer writing code. But in the future, maybe building is not as hard. It's more crafting the right experience aligned with the business objective, maybe the harder part. So I can see the domain experts, product owners will be more involved in the building and iteration as well.
Great. So I can tell my PM friends that they can put this on their LinkedIn, be like PM/subject matter expert in AI.
I do think that's kind of like at least for Baserun, we're trying to really empower them to be more involved.
Awesome. Second question, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
How important is human in the loop?
So I do feel this is depends on what you're building. It's hard to like root it everything. Everyone was talking about automated evaluation because that can scale. But if we going back on like in general developing models as a whole, like developing models always has human in the loop, because if we already automated, AGI already came. So why AGI is not here yet? Because model cannot make all the decisions. There is a human opinion need to be involved. It's more as the way I'm thinking about it, the model will always be better, but human always need to give instruction to communicate what do I want to use the model for. So all the prompt engineer is giving instruction to the model, say, do this. So model can get really good at guessing what you want, but essentially human need to express what we really need to get off the model, no matter how powerful the model is. That's why I think human in the loop will forever important in the next 5 or 10 years, because we are thinking about AI as assistant to human beings. We are just trying to enter to be more perfection, doing more perfect at what they are automating us, help us automate. But near term, I think human in the loop is very useful around labeling data, curating testing sets. But not just because of hallucination or like errors. It's also because we are trying to guide the application to be more aligned with our business objective.
That makes perfect sense. All right, continue. I'm done with questions.
Yeah. So I want to just share this kind of the way I think of a framework around shipping reliable AI at scale. So everyone knows it's a loop. Like you need to like build, test, and monitor, release, then use that feedback, come back to iterate. The way I want to call it, there's like an inner loop and outer loop. This is kind of a chart we use at Cruise as well. So as an inner loop, as you think about your building is a complex application, you have a pipeline. But when you want to iterate in your pipeline, you need to break down by different step, right? So you might need to iterate on a particular prompt. You might iterating a particular step workflow, and then before you ready to release it, you need to bring that step workflow back into your whole application logic to evaluate its end-to-end behavior, and then you release it. So once you release, you still need to go through this outer loop into evaluate the performance. So in this case, like when you're evaluating, oftentimes is at Cruise, we have this like pre-release integration test, a post-release integration test. And why it's important to have evaluation in the outer loop is because if as a business, I need to measure how my application is performing, you have different metrics, right? So first you can collect your customer feedback, see if overall, certification score is higher. That is easier to measure. But if you want to measure like accuracy, as one example, you kind of need to measure on a shared base. You need to have like an integration test sets and not changing as much. So if you are building a chatbot in the outer loop, just let user to do whatever with it, you don't really like how user use it will be different. So if you compare this week's in like score with last week's score, purely based on how the user use it, it's not very consistent. So there's also the need in the post-merge phase, you might want to doing like integration test, running your application through like a 100 testing case and to measure the output. So what I'm drawing this map trying to illustrate, no matter what's your tool right now, like that's kind of what Baserun trying to do. But if you are not using any tool, what you want to achieve in this loop first is in the inner loop stage as you are iterating prompt or iterating subsystem workflow. You want to empower everyone to rapid prototype test. So this is the part I was talking about domain experts. Today the workflow is engineer test, they annotate. But if you give the tool directly to the domain expert, let them to test, to iterate from themselves, deploy the change in a staging environment, let them like test the business logic themselves as well, and so they can get feedback a lot quicker than passing the torch between engineer and the developers, engineer and the domain expert. The other part is like evaluation, and like when we think about the framework, make sure the team are more efficient. We need to be able to combine the both automated tools and human in the loop. Like, of course, human in the loop label everything that scale. So we want to automate the evaluator. But at the same time, we want to bring domain expert in to create more subjective outputs. And over time, we want to automate the human in the loop as well, maybe fund to a evaluation model to help them grade result faster. And in the post-merge, like post-release phase, we want to build into around utilize annotator or automated tool to help them scale up the diagnose and data curation workflow. So this is the other part. As at Cruise, we have this experience when we merge a feature on the road, we have this QA team or release team actually diagnose every incident and then passing that context to the engineer. So this is more around scalability issue. As your application has more users, it's not really feasible for the engineer go diagnose every particular incident. So at this post-release phase, we want to build into our workflow to make sure the diagnose and data curation workflow are scalable and accessible for domain expert or like less technical folks to do the work. The last part is about the monitoring. So this is another, I thought it was a very, very interesting observation in the market. When we first launched GPT 3.5, GPT 4, or any new model came out, now we're talking about Mistral, big, talking about like a cloud. A lot of times people researcher or developer will bring up, okay, here's a benchmark of how the model performance. But how do you really grade a model? It's really to bring back to your own business objective. What are you trying to solve? So developer often are in the tool as, okay, is the app perform well? Is there like a bug? There's errors. Versus PM are in the land of they use Mixpanel, they use Snowflake, they try to translate all the interaction into business metrics. So monitors, they're also a kind of very important role around how do we bridge the gap from business metrics and performance metrics. Like how do we share that insight between the team? And often the product owner in like a large organization need to make a decision around why do we fund it because we want to save costs, or why do we need to develop new feature because the performance is not as optimized. So this is also the part as I do feel all the ops tool will move into a phase as it's not just designed for developer to quickly iterate, it's also designed for product owner be in the same room, same space, to share those product insights, share those product metrics together with the performance metrics. So that's kind of when I think about the framework around how different tooling together, stitch together to continuous iterating, improve the AI applications.
I'm curious on there's a few topics that I'm kind of curious on. Talking about the annotating and automating the tools to scale up the diagnostics, and you're talking about failure scenarios that are happening inside that release phase. I'm kind of curious on if you've seen any like interesting techniques or approaches. I guess like in the driving simulation world or in AI driving, like some of your results, your failure results are very obvious, right? The car didn't do the thing it was supposed to do. But when we're getting back down to the more like software level things or like decision-making categories where maybe it could have made, it made one decision that was reasonable, but it could have made a decision that was better. How, like, is there any tools like that to help identifying like when the models aren't making the correct determinations?
Yeah. So let me just put in a word practical matters, like how do we test? How do we, structure our tests? I think you can break down how you iterate and test in a certain way. Like in the build phase, I was talking about a quick iteration. This part, like testing and evaluation is, I put it right in the center. Like throughout your development life cycle, you need to evaluate it. It's more like our terminology changes. First, as you quickly build and iterate, this part you are just iterating prompt or pipeline or model config. You might don't need to run a regression test suite yet. You are just trying to use a tool to quickly visualize your pipeline, figure out which step goes wrong, and go back to iterate. So probably a lot of you guys use Luncheon, and Lensmeets have this UI to show you the trace. That's kind of what we do at Baserun as well. Like a trace gives you the visibility onto your pipeline. So when something didn't go right, you can quickly identify where it goes wrong. But then when you move to the next phase, let's say if you feel good about your pipeline system, everything connected is working. So you want to run more like a regression test. So regression tests, you can structure as different scale. So unit tests can be, you can write a unit test suites around evaluate a particular prompt. Or you can write a subsystem test suites evaluating a particular workflow in a smaller scale to make sure the sub-unit is working well. But before you release, you also want to have like a more integration test suites or end-to-end test suites before you release. Make sure bring that one change into the application level, evaluate the whole application end-to-end behavior, compare the behavior change before your PR merge and post your PR merge. So at Cruise, the way we do it, we have like a comparison table, basically compare my personal feature branch with a main branch before I deploy back. So this is something you need to, it's very it's very similar to traditional software. Like there's not a lot different. You want to do like a different level of testing. So at this stage, we are still talking about like offline testing. You write the suites, run suites, measure result. And you might do another one like a post-release. So this one, what you want to do is just compare two versions, compare my feature branch versus the main branch. But post-release, you might want to create a more time series report. Like if this integration test generated accuracy score of factuality scores, you want to be able to have in Looker, you can do that as well. And it generate time series like from this release compares last release. Like you want to measure the predicted score change like across multiple release and overall understand the trends. And then after you release, you want to still do evaluation on your production logs. So pre-release, you are doing a bunch of testing, measure result. Post-release, you are running evaluation on the production log. So this is a part you can run evaluation either on the end user input or run the evaluation on your AI application's output. In general, you want both. For the end user input, you can run evaluation to prevent like a jailbreak or sensitive, message. You don't want user, abuse your application. On the output, you can run automated evaluation to have a general ballpark around how is my quality doing. But overall, you probably won't catch all the early days, like I was mentioning, like a subjective matter to like topics. So that's the last step around like annotating. So once you run those automated evaluation, at the same time, you might collect your end user feedback, use that as a higher level signal around like which subset of the logs I want to dive deeper. And then you leverage annotator or domain expert to annotating diagnose deeper on each scenario and collecting those data sets for future iteration. So in general, I recommend you have a few, I call it evaluation phase, but it can be like testing phase. As you iterate in prompt, you have unit test. As you bring the prompt back to your workflow, you have like a subsystem test. And before release and post-release, you run integration test. But the score is different. This one is ad hoc, like before I merge PR, I run it. Whereas this one is more like a time series. I want to regularly run it every week so I can understand my performance over a time period of change. And then once I merge it, I want to run evaluation on the continuous monitoring the output. And then the last step, this is more kind of like not really ad hoc, more like a weekly or monthly, depends on your team's like a launching schedule. What I saw people do is they do it weekly, and the PM will go to log all the production data and then combine the output and the post-release output, and they generate dashboard on different metrics of their product, and then monitor the like a time over time, see that change. They might use this step to get a score around friendliness on brand, and they use this step to get like a accuracy, like close QA, like those metrics are more easier to automate, and use this step to measure more subjective metrics, and they combine these two metrics together as a per application product metrics as a way for the team to continually improve at over time. Does this answer your question, or like I'm like too?
Yeah, no, it does. The general answer that I'm hearing is a lot of hard work. Yeah, like that's what I'm hearing, is it's just a lot of hard work, a lot of tooling, a lot of making sure that the business, when they're actually engaging in this type of AI evaluation, that they're understanding the long-term operational cost and the long-term operational impact of deploying one of these models. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it is. I'm more like when I put this slides out there, this is really a very robust thinking about how when you have the AI at scale, that's kind of what larger company or your practice should catch up. Near term, a lot of things this step can be done by a developer. You don't really need a domain expert yet. A lot of tooling is not like you can do by yourself in a lot smaller scale. But as you can think, like at a cruise is more like a more crazy, more like a robust testing cases, just because how much data need to piping through. But same with generative AI application. As soon as you are at a certain scale, you kind of need a different stage of testing evaluation. As a way to like make sure you are continue making progress. Traditional software, once the feature is launched, is then regress. You measure, you test, it works. Versus generative AI, you need to have this continuous recurring practice. Just because the model itself doesn't always, produce the same output.
Yeah, that's one of the other challenges we've been seeing as well is people are like, well, my results are changing over time. How do I now, like, so you're almost kind of patching, I suppose, is the best way to put it. Patching based upon an unknown release cycle.
Yeah, so this step is very useful. The reason I build Baserun is a lot of time, like every step here, there's a lot of like back forwards between the domain expert and the engineer. The other part is people are all very new to generative AI. There's not really, it's not about tooling, it's about like what is really a good practice, and most people are still figuring out. I think it's more the challenge around the gap around how do I structure my tooling first, and then of course once you go through the phase trying to stitch a bunch of tools together. Currently, I saw people do is like they have like a data warehouse, log all their data, and they export the data to a Google Sheet for the non-technical user to labeling it. Once they label it, they maybe upload again to like Mixpanel to this part and get a more time series reports. But all this testing in between, they still use like Google Sheet to tracking the experiment. Like there's some like a CI/CD workflow, but in general, feel like the data is all over the place. Made the next iteration really hard because people need to gathering data from a bunch of Google Sheet, tracking the versions in Sheet, and then the collaboration and make sure we are consistently making improvement is not. I don't feel like any two have exactly figured out yet.
That actually answered my question too, because I was going to ask about like how people are normally like drawing the bridge between like mixed panels and PMs doing like business like daily active user metrics there versus like going into a tool like Baserun or like an observability tool and trying to like make a connection with like how the LLM is affecting the metrics on mixed panel. So that kind of answered that question too.
Yeah, that's kind of what people do today. And what we are doing in Baserun is that we want to have like this monitoring piece. We have shared insights between domain expert and developer. So developer get visibility of their whole pipeline, but also we can generate like a dashboard around business metrics. And we want to, like for this stage, we want to offer domain expert tools to directly manipulate the prompts and deploy it right into their staging environment so they can test with their business logic. And we have a lot of testing too as well. But I think right now, even including us and a lot of our competitor, a lot of tools out there, people don't really know how to use it. And it's also a little bit tricky to integrate to their existing like tech stack right now. Archar, do you have a question?
Yeah, a question. Are you able to talk a little bit about the automated prompt improvements yet, or is it still too new?
Oh, we have a feature like that. I can show you. We try to launch hope to launch today. We have a few like bugs. I was launching our new landing page today. I was pretty excited. Took me a while to get it over.
It looks different. You just notice like the whole website looks different.
Yeah, so our tool, we have like a bunch of prompt engineer tool. We have Playground, you can, iterating a prompt. We have like a compare view, you can do side-by-side comparison. Director, which is the tool help you, more managing like all the prompts in different production environments, and then look at the compilations, and you can deploy particular word into staging right away in our UI. The automated, we have this feature we're working. It's kind of working. I need to fix a couple of bugs. So what we did is more like if we think prompt engineer is human give better instruction to the bot, right? And there's so many rules around how to write better prompts. So what if we can assist human to write better prompt by teaching a bot to understand all the prompt engineering tool? So what we did is we kind of train the box to do that, to learn all the prompt engineer tool. This is a customer support prompt. So we kind of just hint the user a little bit, tell me what do you want to get off this prompt, and then we can help user rewrite this prompt as, okay, here's your prompt before, here's our suggested prompt for this particular purpose. And then you can save it back to the playground. I don't know if they save it, if I need to refresh. Yeah, so I need to refresh a little bit to see the new one. So that's kind of what we did. This is not gonna replace entirely the process of writing prompt, but we can save you some time iterating the prompt. Because today, if you go to any prompt engineer tool, say, oh, here's a rule setting, here's the rule setting, here's like all the rules should follow, use this language, so the bot will push for response JSON. Like there's so many rules, it's really hard to memorize, and sometimes there's a logic confliction if you have your prompt super long. So we just want to help user at least automate that part. You don't need to read all the rules. We'll give you a improved version based on all the existing prompt engineer rules. And then because it's in the playground, you can just run it in the playground to test it. And then we also have like a bulk testing feature. You can, like what we did here, we have evaluation run, either from SDK or through UI. You can do stuff as, okay, I want to compare different prompt template. You can go through our workflow as, okay, I want to compare different prompt template, and then you can select a particular data set, and then select the evaluation as well. Create an evaluation run to evaluate which version of the prompt perform better. Then we can generate a report, tell the user, okay, the improved prompt does perform better for this reason, based on all these scores. So it's more give people more like end-to-end tools for them to quickly iterate. Once they finish iterate, they can use our prompt directory to deploy to staging, testing your business logic. But another very common use case for developer use today is they use the trace feature as visualize their end-to-end pipeline. You can run automated evaluation on your production data, or we have this like labeling feature, annotating feature. You can label your output, and then you can use this as a way to debug, or you can copy to playground to iterate in this prompt. This is kind of like one entry point. The one thing we do a little bit different from Landsmith is our whole goal is not trying to show you an agent pipeline, because agent is really tied to the framework you are using, the tool call you are using. What we want to do is more tie back to your in general software building an application. So we have more flexibility around, if you call third-party API, you just want to log the output, you can do customer logs into our pipeline. So you can curate the pipeline exactly what you want it to see. Then it depends on agent framework. Because not everyone's building agent. Most of the time is trying to incorporate the AI feature into their pipeline, automate a step in their pipeline. So that's kind of what we are building right now. And and we have similar, I will call ourselves more like observability and evaluation platform. I think it's close to Landsmith. I haven't really super close watch what they do now. I think the bigger difference is we emphasize on collaboration a lot more. So we'll have a lot of feature parity around what user can achieve through UI versus you have to use SDK. So for a non-technical user, PM or annotator, they can use our tool without touching the code. They can iterate in prompt, deploy changes. And we have data curation flow. They can label data, annotating data, and they can have more shared context of their AI application. We do more advanced in the monitoring. We have more feature around observability, not just for your local iterations. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I guess just thanks for that, Effy. That's really useful. Very cool. I think that would have been super handy multiple times within the last couple of months. I'm not gonna lie. Just a final question. So if we're doing inference somewhere else, let's say on GCP, how do we kind of integrate with Baserun today? Is it through API, or is it you kind of have to be all in with Baserun to get all this
Oh, you don't have to all in. Like I see a lot of people they will keep use Sentry mixed panel and use Baserun for monitors, anything related with LLM. It's pretty common practice. We want to make it more integrated, more like from Sentry have a link to Baserun. Yeah, so we have SDK. It's pretty easy to install. You install us just 2-step. We can log all that requests, and we use Monkey Patch, so it's not a proxy service. You can it's more observed. So there's no interruption on your main application. There's no performance impact as well.